Hello my friends and welcome back. It's Monday, so happy Monday to you. You're going to have a fantastic week, my friends. Let's dive into the news from the Ukrainian war and we'll start with the Ukrainian hero. Quote, "If I don't go and somebody else won't go, the Russians will soon be running our yard." Alexei Tirpak is a Ukrainian serviceman of Roma origin, a scout from Sakarpatia with the call sign Angel. He joined the armed forces of Ukraine as a volunteer at the beginning of the full-scale war when he was 24 years old. Despite being wounded numerous times, he returned to the battlefield every time. However, during a combat mission at the beginning of 2024, Alexei died in Donetsk region. Eternal memory to Ukrainian hero. This is Alexei.
Чого ж наша славна Україна зажурилася?
And when he was withdrawing, he knew that ours were behind because the guys had scattered. So he was walking and singing so that ours could hear that it was him and not the Russian. When they started showing on TV what was happening in Bucha and other cities, he was so angry that he was unable to sit still. He said, I'm going, and that's it. When I wouldn't let him go, he'd say, "Mom, if I don't go, who will?" Every mother says, "Son, don't go. If I don't go and someone else won't go, the Russians will be soon running our yard." Women told me, "You have children, they need you." And I'd say, the children are fine, they're alive and well, they have a father, and Alexei is there by himself. I want people to know that Romani people also give their lives for our Ukraine. That their hearts are bleeding, his heart was bleeding for Ukraine. I pray to God that I could dream about you and I could see you. I love you very much, my beautiful child. This is the war story of Alexei Tirpak, a Roma origin fighter who died, a hero for Ukraine. Now, my friends, I'll give you a very short overview of the Pokrovsk front of eastern Ukraine. Now, this is the frontal area where Russians are advancing the quickest. They are very rapidly advancing and Ukrainians are retreating, unable to hold the Russian onslaught. Unfortunately, I hate to report this, but this is the truth in that frontal section right now. Pokrovsk, the biggest city in the area, which is the goal of the Russian advancement, is a logistical hub for the Ukrainians. So if Russians take it, it's a very, very big blow for the Ukrainian army and their logistics. So they will definitely hold tooth and nail to it, like Avdiivka and like Bakhmut. Regarding the Pokrovsk front, I quote, "I've never seen such a speed in a Russian advance," the commander of the Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance unit fighting in the area told the Telegraph this week. "It's very rapid and our problem is the same. We don't have infantry, we don't have enough artillery or shells, we don't have enough drones. The situation is very complicated and not in our favor. The most critical thing for us now is the large number of soldiers of the Russian Federation. They outnumber us, I reckon, by at least 5-1. There are different frontal areas with completely different strengths, different characteristics. For example, in Kursk, Ukrainians are advancing and they don't outnumber the Russians, but they do intensify power, EV and drones. But in Pokrovsk, it's the opposite. So different frontal areas have different characteristics to both sides. But the truth is that in Pokrovsk, Ukrainian army is retreating, and at the moment, you could say they are losing in that area. Now I'll read you a very short overview of the most recent big attack battle in Pokrovsk. Russians assaulted with 16 infantry fighting vehicles. It's one of the biggest attacks in recent weeks. Today, the 59th Brigade engaged in an incredibly fierce fierce battle with Russian forces attempting to advance in Pokrovsk. The Ukrainian troops faced an assault of 16 heavy armored vehicles and several waves of infantry attack. Despite the odds, the brigade managed to destroy 12 Russian armored vehicles, with the remaining ones retreating. Confirmed Russian losses include 93 infantry soldiers. Now, yes, Russians are taking massive losses like they did in Avdiivka and Bakhmut, but they are still advancing. Now, my friends, it's quite dark news to begin this Monday, so I gotta spice it up for you. We're both only human and we need to laugh. So I bring you Botin, the sleeper CIA agent. Putin is a sleeper CIA agent. He's destroyed his army, weakened Russia, built up NATO, killed Russian speakers in the east, brought in Finland and Sweden to NATO, forever bonded Ukrainian language and identity, and created the modern Ukrainian military. Oh yes, Putin truly is a CIA sleeper agent, and he has been activated with a code word. Alright, my friends, now with this positive attitude, we'll dive into a very short but summarizing analysis of how the Kursk invasion. When we talk about Pokrovsk, it's, Ukrainians are in full retreat. In Kursk, they're in full advance. So how did Sirsky and the Ukrainian intelligence plan that invasion? It's very important that we analyze it because it gives us an idea of Ukrainian capabilities of planning large-scale offensive operations without the enemy knowing about it. Ukraine's OPSEC in planning the Kursk operation has been spectacular. Sirsky had evidently drawn conclusions from Ukraine's failed counteroffensive during the summer of 2023, when Ukraine consulted with the United States and other Western partners, deployed newly formed brigades, and telegraphed its plans with videos and public comments. Only a small number of senior officers took part in the meetings led by Sirsky to thrash out detailed plans of the incursion. Sirsky tapped battle-hardened units such as the 80th and 82nd Air Assault Brigades to lead the incursion and didn't inform the United States of the plans. That is one of the biggest changes. Kursk has been the biggest offensive operation ever since the summer of 2023, the failed counteroffensive. And we see many learned lessons being applied in the Kursk invasion. First of all, now this is not to thrash the United States. I mean, you guys are the biggest supporter of Ukraine so far by numbers, but Sirsky and the Chief of Staff and the entire office, they did not brief the United States on the plans of Kursk invasion. That was one of the biggest changes. The strong point of Sirsky is that he is a general who can act unusually, sudden, unexpectedly for the enemy. Serhiy Cheravati, Sirsky's former communication advisor, said, "He knows we don't have parity and can't go head-to-head, so he uses cunning and advantage we have." Sirsky uses Ukrainian army strengths, and patches up the weaknesses. That's his biggest strength, to see what the Ukrainian army has, that is speed, maneuverability, and logistics. Compared to the Russians, Ukrainians do have better logistics. He uses those to maneuver fast, conduct offensive operations in secrecy, and strike when the enemy is not expecting. Now, my friends, to bring you the second meme of the day, this is Lenin in Kursk Oblast under the armed forces of Ukraine. They decided not to bring this one down. Usually they destroy them like you should. I mean, Lenin just was in general a horrible massacre preaching man. He was a monster, let's say it honestly. But in this case, with these colors, I would even leave him up. Heroям slava, slava Ukraini. Alright, my friends, you ready for some rumors? I'll say it again, rumors. You want to have some gossip? Because this is only rumors and gossip. We have no information about this whatsoever, but so many sources are talking about it that I feel that I'm obliged to report about this. Take it with a grain of salt and take it as it is a rumor. Where is Lavrov? There have been many Lavrov statements in the Russian media over the past 24 hours, but no one has seen him personally. Every year on September 1st, Lavrov gives a lecture at Moscow State Institute of International Relations. If he's not there tomorrow, then there will really be a lot of questions about where he is. Now, I didn't see him there tomorrow, or today actually, first was yesterday. So we don't know where he is, nobody knows where he is. I wouldn't go there and claim he was dead, but people do. People also claim that Putin is dead. Now, again, a very bold claim, so take it as a rumor. Putin is dead. Information is coming that Putin and Lavrov were killed by the FSB. The fall has begun. We're waiting for the confirmation of the information. Please stay at home in Moscow. Now, I'll say it again. Just so many people are talking about it that I'll just give you the idea of what people talk about. In here you can see Putin's motorcades. So, seems to be very much alive to me. I personally do not think Lavrov and Putin are dead at all, not even close, but many people do think that. On this photo, my friends, you will see a target that we don't see much. It's destroyed by Ukrainians. It's destroyed by the armed forces of Ukraine in Donbass. This is a Russian S-400 air defense system. It was destroyed, the launcher and the radar system also, with the combined price, export price of that system being 1 billion USD. Don't ask me how any Russian system can ever cost that much, but that's the price they sell it to Turkey and India who have bought these systems. Of course, they really regret that because S-400 has really demonstrated to be useless almost, even shooting down Ukrainian drones. We'll get to it. We have some proof of how Ukrainian drones just slip by that system. But yeah, Turkey and India have bought this system with $1 billion a system. And now one of them has been destroyed again in Donbass. On August 31st and the night of September the 1st, in between that time frame, Ukrainians launched the biggest drone attack against the Russian Federation they have ever launched. Russian channels report on a large raid of Ukrainian kamikaze drones in the direction of Voronezh. They also write about sea kamikaze drones in the direction of temporarily occupied Crimea. Now, I'll say 2.5 years of war and the biggest, so that means something. Recently, a week ago actually, Russians launched the biggest drone and missile attack against Ukraine. Now Ukrainians responded. That is the response. And their numbers, they don't fall behind the Russian ones. We're getting to the age of this war, the period of this war where Ukraine is able to answer these hundreds of drones and missiles shot out by Russia with the same numbers. The Ukrainian armed forces launched a record number of UAVs, more than 100 pieces. Now this is of course estimate, there was actually more. In direction of several regions of the center and south Russia. Reports of downing come from Lipetsk, Oryol, Bryansk, Tula, Belgorod and Voronezh regions. So we have these regions of Russia report shooting down Ukrainian drones. Russian Telegram channels report a drone attack on a Kashira State District power plant in Moscow region last night. By the way, this power plant is about 20 miles from the Kremlin itself. Wow. King Ukrainian drone is like, hey, very nice, king of the castle. Also, Tver region, there are 2 fires after drone attacks. According to locals, the power plant and the gas distribution network located several kilometers away were attacked. Oh wow, so you're telling me striking critical infrastructure is a game 2 can play? Ukraine has yet another massive drone attack on Russia, one of the largest ever. Given the fact that Russian air defense are so weak in the areas beyond immediate war zones, even in Moscow, Russia should expect a very hot winter of fire and smoke. Sounds like Game of Thrones series or something. Live by the sword, don't be surprised to get your butt kicked hard by the sword. It's the dildo of consequence penetrating the Russian rear areas. That's what it is. Now this here is the, let's just call it how people call it, Moscow power plant, thermal power plant, 20 miles from the Kremlin. Ukrainian drone strike successfully targeted the Konakovo power plant stationed in Russia's Tver region overnight. Here's how the power plant looks after today's attack. And since the Moscow power plant was actually damaged quite heavily, It's a very short thread for you what it means, because Russia is not like other countries when we talk about logistics, since it's so vast and the capital is mostly on the it's on the western side, so the logistics, the highways, the train lines, it's all focused on the western part of Russia. But the resources come from the east, and the logistics in between is still controlled from Moscow, which means you damage Moscow's capabilities of producing electricity. You do damage the link between the east and the west of Russia, which means less resources for the capital. No electricity in Moscow, no electric trains. What's that mean for a country that moves 86% of its freight on electrical rail? Russia next time probably shouldn't centralize your nationwide rail network with the hub centered on Moscow, like wheel spokes with virtually no redundancies. So if there is issues on the line, it cascades out rapidly. Here we can see what this thread means. This is the Russian rail line. Most of this is electrical rail. And I don't know much about rail, but let's just say the central control and the commands, automatic commands, come from stations in Moscow, which depend on electricity. So if you cut those or hack those, the logistics system can collapse. Thank you, every Russian leader since Lenin, for pursuing a 100% electrified rail infrastructure project. And thank you, Tsarist Russia, for making an overly centralized rail network centered completely from Moscow. Because you were afraid of the Russian Far East becoming a little too independent, and you wanted to make them wholly reliant on the Kremlin to keep them in line. I'm not going to go forward, but meaning is this. Ukraine has the ability to strike Russian power plants near Moscow. These power plants are very directly connected to Russian logistics capabilities, since 86% of the logistics, of the train logistics, is electrified. And you take away electricity, of course, they have other means. They have nuclear power plants also, which Ukraine will never attack. But it still hardens the situation. Yes, you can direct electricity from nuclear power plants to army vital infrastructure, but that leaves some of the civilian areas without electricity, still largening the internal conflict of Russia. By the way, we're talking about a thermal power plant 20 miles from Kremlin itself. Shouldn't that area be the most protected, air defense protected area in all of Moscow? Russia and the Kremlin, because this power plant is under the defense missile shields of all of these dots you see here. They're all anti-air defense systems centered in 3 layers around Moscow. If you don't know how Moscow is built, and they have this 3-layer highway going actually in circles around Moscow. It's called the Highway of Death well before the war, because there's so many accidents on it. Well before, like in the 2007, 8, 9, 10, that time it was already called the Highway of Death. So many car accidents. Well, the Highway of Death anyway is also the highway of air defense systems. This is how systematically they are positioned to defend the Kremlin, defend Moscow, and also this power plant. So Ukrainian drones flew through all of that. What is it, like 30 air defense systems, 40 air defense systems? What the hell? This proves, first of all, that Russian air defense is really not capable of shooting down Ukrainian drones, and secondly, that the numbers don't count on this. Look how many of them are. The Moscow Air Defense District was a joke then and is a joke now. Here is another photo to illustrate the same thing. Keep in mind that Moscow is protected by a ring of 22 S-300s and S-400s air defense sites, most of which should cover the refinery. Additionally, there are at least 9 recently redeployed Pantsir S-1 and 2 systems that should have been able to protect against this type of a drone attack. I'm sorry, it was not a thermal plant, it was a refinery. I even confused those two, because Ukrainian attacks against Russian thermal plants and refineries are so frequent now, almost daily, that you continue to confuse these two. The Kaputnya oil refinery is one of the few industrial facilities still in Moscow's vicinity. It's only 16 kilometers, actually 10 miles from the Kremlin. What's funny for me is that I was checking out, Tender was checking out that plant only a few days ago on Google Earth and thought, oh, that's a nice target. Hey, Tender, you should check out the Kremlin tomorrow and think that's a nice target. Russians themselves claim that they shot down 160 drones over Russia. But we see destruction in thermal power plants and in oil refineries all across Russia, different areas. So we don't know how many they shot down, but they definitely did not shoot down 160. I would even say maybe just only 16, because in Russian statistics, like in the Soviet statistics, it's quite in fashion to just add a zero, and that does the trick for the superiors. Russians did answer with their own missile and drone attack on the 1st of September, the night of the 1st of September. And here we can see a children's playground, and this is missile explosion here. So this missile costs probably many millions of dollars, because no Russian missiles are cheaper than that. Most of them very expensive. And that hole here costs 3 schools, maybe 3 brand new school buildings with the teachers' wages, or this one hole in the children's playground. Which option would your government choose? An unexploded warhead of the Kinzhal 47 hypersonic missile has been neutralized in Ukraine's Lviv region. The cost of such missiles starts at $10 million. And you can see it's right here. Didn't explode, so Russia develops a missile, huge amount of money, maybe hundreds of millions, even $1 billion is put into the development process. Then they produce this missile, which cost over $10 million. Then it's fired upon Ukraine. It doesn't explode, so it doesn't do even the job it's meant for. And with 10 million, I mean, with the West, yeah, building is more expensive, but in Russia or in Ukraine, with $10 million, you could build 10 brand new schools with European standards. You could build an entire modernized hospital with the gear. You can do so much with this one missile's money. Hell, if I would, even the most conservative leader in the world with the money, just don't send this missile and put this people's money, it's people's money with taxes. Put this to S&P 500 and within 5 years you take out 12 million instead of 10. Small gains, but then you can build another school. Hey, there's so much more you can do with this money, which I would do if I had 10 million and the whole population of Russia. Oh, damn, I would make their lives so much better. So, look at this picture. I have no information about it, but I can tell you it's from Russia, because we had this in the 90s or in the 80s, even in Estonia, when still Russian culture was a little bit more influenced here. In Russia, people steal everything. It's the culture of theft. The culture itself was stolen from the Ukrainians, and in the Soviet Union, the culture of theft was even rooted in the mind of the Soviet citizen and in everybody. And now this, you see a soap in a Russian bathroom, it's very normal. You just take it, because it's, you know, you can steal it, you will steal it. So what they do is they try to prevent it like that. This is a liquor store in Florida, United States. We are no longer selling any Russian-made product. I applaud this liquor store. I wish every store in the world that completes this challenge or mission will put the same label up, and I knowingly will shop in these stores only. This label means more than just meets the eye. This means knowingly going away from consuming Russian products, meaning sending money to Russia, when sending any money to Russia means enabling the production of missiles and drones and tanks and such. I'm in a good mood. I'll give you one more. I gotta give you one more. This is an old one, but I think you need it for this Monday. 1 million orcs are headed our way. What shall we do, sir? Get me a coffee. No sugar. In this video, my friends, you can see Russians building a wooden shelter for their tank to protect it from Ukrainian kamikaze drones and Baba Yaga style drones. I gotta say, I have not seen Russians being organized like that. They usually just destroy, don't build. These Russians build. Wow. Okay. But it doesn't really do much, because the first drone will destroy this shelter and the second one will go through. My friends, do you remember Hitler Jugend? You remember? If you're old, you do. If you're young, you have read about it. It was a real thing and it was really bad. Well, now it's back. Putins Ugand is a real thing in Russia. And it's not just, oh, they're teaching some bad stuff to children. No. Have you heard about the African child soldiers? These children have no problems in pushing that trigger when they need to or when they're forced to. They have no problem. And when they get old, no conscience whatsoever. If a person is produced like that, I cannot say grown up, produced, you produce these kind of monsters. If a person is produced like that, you are producing an army of robots, an army of zombies. Now, I'll read you a very short paragraph of the Russian state plan until 2030. and then I'll open it up. We received this strategy with the State Council Commission of Youth Policy, as well as in the State Duma. I would like to thank Tatiana Galikova, as well as First Deputy Chief Staff of the Presidential Executive's Office, Sergei Giriyenko, who assisted and accompanied us in our efforts throughout the entire process. This strategy is designed to create an enabling environment for young people to unleash their multiple talents. It targets various social and age groups by covering people between 14 to 35-year-old, from high school students to young specialists, just as you have said. This provides for a segmented approach to working with them. By 2030, Russia is expected to establish an entire framework for working with young people in order to educate and raise new generations of responsible and patriotic citizens. Under responsible and patriotic citizens, you can create an army of tens of millions of zombies who are ready to die for the Tsar and ready to commit any war crime for the Tsar. What does it really mean? I mean, this is government talk. We don't understand it. Now let's get down to it with you and me, people's talk. This summer in Russia saw a rise of military patriotic camps for kids. Children listened to talks, participants of the Ukrainian invasion learned to operate drones and wove camouflage nets for the army. These camps have become widely popular since 2020. Many of these camps offer free attendance funded by the government. With the rising cost of the leisure activities, these camps have become the only affordable option for some families, even if not all parents are enthusiastic about the military ideology. But because Putin has created the situation of poverty in Russia, then this is a place for children to go and have fun in the summer, the only place because it's free. And with that free price comes the price of propaganda and brainwashing and zombifying. Camps in the Moscow region offer activities like meeting war veterans, sports, paintball and other young soldier courses. There are limited sets of war-related words with letter Z. That's why most camps are named Sazjitnik. Some camps have faced scandals. A camp in Leningrad region faced investigations in 2022 due to reports of counselors abusing children, including firing airsoft guns at their legs. The camp was temporarily closed, but has since been reopened. I'm not going to read you the rest, but you get the idea. If you're in an age where you have children or grandchildren, you're very much aware of how important are the first 10, 15 years of education they get from their friends, parents and society. That is the building block of that entire child's future. If that is Z ideology, imperialism, cruelty, everything away from compassion, just to hurt, just to take, just to steal, then that's how that person is going to be. And a society is its people, an army is also its people. So any kind of army built with people like that in 20 years, it's gonna be tough to beat that army because they're brainwashed for the reason they don't fear, they don't feel guilty, they like to hurt and steal. It's going to be very hard to fight that army. So we have to fight and win now. Ever since in June, United States threatened Chinese banks with secondary sanctions if they do business with Russia. I kid you not, it has worked. Within the last 3 months, Russian and Chinese banks, with the transaction in between them, they have faced issues. Chinese banks have one by one stopped transaction with the Russian banks, stating that they have different reasons, but actually we know why, because the secondary sanctions from the United States would mean a death sentence to these Chinese banks, because these Chinese banks are very much intertwined with the United States money. And if that were to stop, and the United States has that capability, then it would be really bad. So they're ready to ditch Russia, because Russia amounts to 10 to 15% of the transaction and the United States amounts to 50% of their transactions. So of course they will have to choose a side if they want to keep making money. So what has this led Russian-Chinese transactions to? Welcome back to the 19th century. Russia and China have begun hiring couriers to pay for goods in gold. Russia has begun using gold to pay for goods from China due to problems with bank transfers, Reuters reports. After the United States Treasury threatened secondary sanctions for financial transactions with Moscow in June and credit institutions tightened their checks on transactions, one of the working solutions was a scheme with gold. The metal was bought, transported to Hong Kong, where it was sold, and the cash was deposited in a local bank account, the agency's sources reported. And now, my friends, I will bring you the Joni Askola, a legendary NAFO analyst from Finland. I'll just read you his report. It's a nice ending to the Monday's video to prep you up for the coming week. Deeper and deeper, Ukrainian deep strikes against Russia serve as Ukraine's most effective deterrent and the fastest path to ending the war. Description: Russia is bombarding Kharkiv and its civilians, causing numerous casualties today. Meanwhile, Ukraine is still barred from using Western equipment to target Russian air bases and is instead relying on its own drones for strikes. Ukraine's deep strikes against Russia began some time ago and have been intensifying and increasing in scale. Last night, attacks were significant, despite Russia's claims of having shot down over 150 drones. Since Ukraine's allies are not providing sufficient support and restricting the use of available weapons, Ukraine must resort to these methods for survival. Facing an existential threat, Ukraine's allies need to remove ineffective restrictions. By conducting deep strikes into Russia, Ukraine can not only confront the average Russian, who has been trying to overlook the conflict, but also damages Russia's economy. This approach is the most effective way to hasten the end of the war. The war will not conclude simply because Ukraine or Russia gains a little more territory. It will end when enough Russians realize that this conflict is unwinnable and when the cost becomes bothersome enough for them. It may take years for that realization to occur, as the average Russian harbors imperialistic views shaped by pervasive and effective propaganda. Nonetheless, the shift in perspective will eventually happen over time. Russia may need to face further humiliation along with increased casualties and economic costs for this realization to take hold. These strikes contribute to that outcome. Russia's economy is heavily burdened, with the key interest rate climbing to 18%. From 7.5 in June 2023, the average Russian is starting to feel the effects gradually, though it will take more time for the full impacts to be realized. If you are from Europe or from America and you have taken any kind of a loan from a bank, let's say a mortgage, to buy a home, think about your interest rate. What interest were you paying for the bank? That interest rate is very directly connected to this country's central bank's interest rate. Russian central bank interest rate is 18%. You add bank's profit to that and you get 20 to 22% interest that you have to pay for the cheapest money in the world, which is a mortgage money compared to other monies. So 22%, would you take out a loan on that? That's what the Russian civilian is working with right now, and they're not the richest country in the world if we look at the regular person. Now, my friends, I'll bring you my favorite part of the video, and for the first time this Monday and this week, I'll butcher some Buy Me a Coffee monthly members with my Estonian pronunciation. Yo, don't knov me. Timothy Makken. Again, Timothy, every time I've said your name, I think 5 times at least. Kajot. Someone, hey, someone is back, my favorite. Bub. Krimoke. Until my next video, my friends, which will be on Wednesday, so be sure to be back. Slava Ukraini, and bye-bye.